Doug Ford onto Fox News to show them that we're not messing around up here. And we're going to send Danielle next. Maybe we won't send her. We'll send Danielle. No, maybe we won't. We won't send Danielle. No, that's a bad idea. Forget. Strike that. Just ignore that back there.
Liberal leader Mark Carney at a rally over the weekend talking about premiers appearing on Fox News to advocate for cross-border diplomacy. He says it would be a bad idea, quote unquote, to put Alberta Premier Danielle Smith on the network. Ontario Premier Doug Ford brushed off the comments this morning, saying Carney was just joking around, but Smith had a different response.
Well, I've noticed this with progressive men, how much they talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. And the attitude is sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues.
So who's the best premier in Canada? Danielle Smith. Just love this response, and I'll go into it in a larger way in a minute here when we come back. A few words about where we are in this campaign, about what Danielle Smith did, but what Carney's in trouble for again, and about that rally in Edmonton last night. Truly, truly historic. When we come back.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
We need political change. But we also need to resolve to resist.
Yes, it's David Krayden coming at you live from our nation's capital in Ottawa, where it's snowing. We got about, I would say an inch of snow last night and woke up to this. It's going to go away, but very unusual to have this amount of snow in Ontario. If you're not in the snow belt at this time of year. Anyway, I was just getting into spring, just feeling good about the weather again, but here we go. I love this story with Danielle Smith because I played this clip yesterday with Mark Carney denigrating Danielle Smith. Oh, no, we can't send her. She's not part of our Team Canada. She's not part of Team Carney. Doug Ford is, though. We can send the faux conservative. Danielle Smith is a true conservative, a principled conservative, and she's fighting the good fight. We had her on this broadcast a couple of weeks ago. I want to have her on again before the election, I hope. We'll see. But really admire the fact that she's got guts. She's got moxie, which is something Doug Ford ain't never going to have. He's never going to find it within him. You remember this? I love this because I reported on this. I was a columnist at the time for the Western Standard, and I wrote a column about this meeting between Danielle Smith and then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. This is classic.
That's the big one. Here, let's
So you notice how he really squeezes the hand like he's trying to say, I'm in authority here. And then he says, here, sit down. I love that. How many times did Trudeau do that to premiers, female premiers, or female cabinet ministers, or female MPs? Sit down over there, please. Shut up. Don't say anything more. I'm the leader here. And of course, Trudeau, what a hypocrite. Calls himself a proto-feminist, a male feminist. Just is so supportive of women's rights. Was so sad when Kamala Harris won the presidential election. Remember him going, thank you very much, Justin, for really pissing off Donald Trump by saying, I wish Kamala had have won. It set back women's rights decades. Well, no, you have set back women's rights. If it means equality and not equity. And that's what Danielle Smith stands for. Equality, not equity. She is a true conservative. Now, let's play the whole session here because she gets some snarky questions about Alberta separatism. Is she feeding Alberta separatism? Let's listen to this.
Doug Ford on a Fox.
Oh, sorry. There we go.
Graham Thompson, the Star. I have a question on today's topic. is a second question. The first question is going back to this idea about Western separation. Preston Manning wrote an op-ed last week in the Globe and Mail saying, warning people in the rest of Canada, a vote for Carney's Liberals is a vote for Western secession. Do you see it that way?
I think that there is a lot of frustration on the part of Albertans, and I think you see it. I mean, I'd be blind if I didn't see what is occurring in the media, on social media. I have to acknowledge that there's a lot of unhappiness on the part of Albertans in the way we've been treated by the Liberal government for the past 10 years. And unfortunately for the current Prime Minister, he seems to not be very clear about what it is he's going to do to reset that relationship, because he says different things in different parts of the province, different parts of the country, different things in English and French. And so I'm going to have a 6-month period after the election where I have a number of items that I put on the table early that I think need to be done to address the 10 years of economic devastation that the federal government has caused to our province. And I would hope no matter who wins that we'd be able to correct those things. But I judge people more by their action than by their words. And so I want to be able to see what happens after the next election. And then I'll gauge where Albertans are at that point.
We have a question from Rick Bell from Post Media. Your line is open.
Good afternoon, Premier and Minister. And of course, to Dr.
I should mention Rick Bell is a longtime columnist for the Calgary Sun and Herald. It used to be just the Calgary Sun, but now they're basically the same paper. They're all owned by Post Media. I knew Rick Bell fairly well when I was a columnist for the Calgary Herald many years ago. And Rick has always been brutally honest. He's pro-conservative. He's pro-Danielle Smith, obviously, but he's brutally honest in his writing. And I think, like myself, he's never been in the bag. When he sees something he doesn't like, he'll say so. But I love his question here.
Dr. Eagle, who I've known for many, many years. How do you feel about being mocked by the Prime Minister of Canada and Liberal leaders, which he did, I believe, in Victoria, bringing your name up and the name of Premier Ford, but more so yourself, and making you the butt of jokes during the campaign?
Well, I've noticed this with progressive men, how much they talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. And so this is a pretty consistent type of approach that I've seen, not only from the current Prime Minister, but the former one as well. And the attitude is, sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues, and I'm going to continue advocating on behalf of my province, whether he likes it or not.
And supplementary is, and I know you've stated obviously you are not a separatist, but do you think?
See, it's very important. Carney is implying, and the Liberals are implying, that Danielle Smith is stoking the fires, wherever you heard that cliche, of separatism in Alberta. No, Danielle Smith is recognizing that if Mark Carney becomes the elected Prime Minister and not just the appointed one, Canada will suffer a period of national disunity, if you will. It will be a national unity crisis. And Danielle Smith has to acknowledge that. Otherwise, she's delusional. It doesn't mean you're trying to encourage people to separate or encouraging your province to separate. You have to acknowledge the reality of what Mark Carney means for Canada. He means catastrophe. And there's a lot of stupid Canadians right now who don't seem to get that. Now, why is that? I'll talk about that in a moment. Why are there so many stupid Canadians? Well, this is a question we really have to answer.
Canadians elsewhere, outside Alberta, should be concerned at what a Liberal victory, especially a Liberal majority government victory, would mean for a lot of people in Alberta, because the emails I get is they're not concerned about that. They just think we're a bunch of self-entitled whiners. So and have written on top. So what are your thoughts about the fact that what should Canadians think at all about that national unity question?
I put on the table 9 things that I know that the federal government needs to do to reset its relationship with Alberta, and many of those things are necessary to reset the relationship with all of the provinces. If you go across the country, it's difficult to get anything built, any type of critical infrastructure. It's difficult to get any type of mining operations approved. You have not just 1 or 2 year timelines, you've got 10-year timelines to get things built and taken to market. And quite frankly, it's the federal government's job under the trade and commerce power that they have to facilitate that international access. So I would say that everyone should be concerned about the direction, and this is a very important election. Everybody should be concerned, should listen to the promises, and to see which of the candidates is actually going to unleash the economic power of every single province and every single region and every single industry. We just have had 10 years of experience with the Liberals where they have done every possible thing they could to try to keep our oil and gas in the ground, or incentive or disincentivize investment, or chase away investment, or cancel investment. And I'm just here to say that ends regardless of who becomes Prime Minister of Canada. And I think that as a measure of goodwill, addressing those 9 issues I put on the table would be a good start. So I'm going to judge it based on the actions of whoever happens to win on April the 28th.
And of course, she has already endorsed Pierre Poilievre as her choice of who wins on April 28th. And that will be certainly a lot easier of a ride for Alberta if Pierre Poilievre becomes Prime Minister. And you have to remember, Pierre Poilievre did reside and was raised in Alberta, in Calgary. And that's where I first met Pierre Poilievre. He was actually working on a campaign. He was the communications guy on a campaign for Ezra Levant, who was seeking a nomination, who had actually won the nomination in Calgary Southwest. I believe it was Southwest. Yeah. And anyway, I won't get into that at the moment, but there's a story to be told there, but this is not the time to tell that story. But I was talking about stupid Canadians. And yes, there are a lot of really stupid Canadians right now because they continue to support. I'm trying to find this slide here. Anyway, our latest poll today, for instance. Where did I find this? I've got to. All right. Sorry. I have to find this because it's extremely important. Presto. Here we go. Now, if we look at this, if you can squint, we've got another 10-point spread here, 46-36 for the Liberals. Now, this poll comes out the day after Pierre Poilievre attracts 15,000 people in Edmonton. And we'll get to that. I'm saving that for last because I like to end on a positive note. Now, do I believe that there's been something going on with something going on with the polling in this country? Has this ever happened before? The question you asked. Has there ever been another election where all the polls have been wrong? Well, yes. The U.S. election we just went through, all the polls were indicating either a really, really close race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris in all of the swing states, or Kamala Harris being ahead. Of course, it wasn't true. The only problem I have with that is, as I've said, we're not dealing with a two-party system in Canada. We're dealing with a four-party system in Quebec. And the Bloc does siphon off voters from Conservatives. There's no question about that in Quebec. So it reduces the number of seats the Conservatives can get in Quebec. And of course, the NDP is imploding right now. Look at that. It's the yellow line on this chart. They're imploding. And where do you think that support's going? Obviously to the Liberals. So that is where the Liberal support is going. Some of it seems to be coming from soft Conservative support. But once again, I believe there's a problem here, and we're going to get to that in a minute. But there are far too many stupid Canadians who are supporting Mark Carney. Now look at this. This is the WeChat. China is, and you have to laugh at the differing headlines. The National Post says Chinese government boosted Carney posts on popular social media platform. Now, much of the mainstream media has pretended that this was some kind of action by China that was hurting Mark Carney, that he was being targeted. See, Mark Carney, the focus of Chinese news account on WeChat, foreign interference watchdog warns. And if you read further into the Star says he was targeted by this Chinese news account, which of course sounds like it was unwelcome. But Mark Carney is so beholden to China, it's beyond belief. The disinformation campaign sought to portray Carney as tough in his dealings with the United States, even trying to tell Canadians that Carney is a rock star. This is what the WeChat was saying. It also sought to play up his credentials and experiences, saying, after all, Carney is a veteran who has been working in the financial circle for many years and is well-versed in the routine of speaking with data. As soon as he came to power, he quickly launched a tax reduction policy. For example, he proposed to reduce taxes on the middle class and reduce the minimum tax rate by 1%. Big bloody deal. At the same time, he waved his hand and abolished the carbon emission tax. No, he did not. He lowered it temporarily to zero. This combined punch tried to please voters with the strategy of giving money plus environmental protection. This is WeChat talking. So that's exactly Mark Carney's talking points, isn't it? This might as well be Mark Carney putting out this information. Thank you very much, Mark Carney. Thank you very much, WeChat and China, for continuing to support Mark Carney. Let's have a look at this. Here's the timeline of Mark Carney's being beholden to Beijing. I have to stop saying China, sorry. It took $276 million loan, actually, from China. He's called for China to dominate the world economy. He let his MP make threats on China's behalf. He replaced that MP with an openly pro-China candidate. China is actively promoting his campaign. And it's not going to stop with WeChat, believe me. It's got absolutely nothing to do with it. I love this little piece. And of course, Sam Cooper has been doing some wonderful work on this, and I always promote Sam's work whenever I can. Breaking: Beijing intelligence operation promotes PM Carney's strength against U.S. to sway Chinese Canadian voters. Election Monitor says. This is what is happening. But let's watch. I think this is a great little thing here.
Time again, tax season. You scramble to file before the deadline, checking every line to avoid getting hit with the dreaded audit. But while you're hard at work and paying more than your share, rich insiders are working just as hard to avoid paying theirs. They hire high-priced lawyers and accountants to exploit loopholes, even moving their money overseas to dodge their taxes. One of them happens to be the Prime Minister. Mark Carney stashed his company cash in Bermuda to avoid Canadian taxes. Brookfield, Carney's company, chose Bermuda not because of the warm weather. According to KPMG, Bermuda has no income tax, capital gains tax, dividend tax, or withholding tax, making it one of the most attractive tax havens in the world. While he was advising Trudeau to raise your taxes, he made sure that his own funds were stashed safely offshore and out of reach. You can't avoid your taxes, and large corporations shouldn't be doing so either. When I'm Prime Minister, I'll crack down on tax cheats. Here's how. 1. I've already announced that I will be naming a Bring It Home Tax Task Force, which will rewrite the rules to make them fairer, simpler, and easier to administer. But what I'm announcing today is that this same task force will also find ways to close all the loopholes that allow companies to stash their money away in tax havens and avoid paying their fair share here in Canada. 2. I'll redirect CRA resources away from harassing and auditing innocent small business owners towards cracking down on offshore tax havens, making sure we collect at least $1 billion more every year from those who try to hide their wealth overseas. 3. We'll create a name and shame publication to expose all the wealthy multinational corporations that are dodging taxes and refusing to pay their fair share. 4. We'll expand the offshore tax informant program, giving whistleblowers up to 20% of the recovered funds when they help expose illegal tax schemes. Conservatives will end the double standard, so multinational corporations and the ultra-rich can't just ship their money abroad to avoid paying their fair share at home. We will target tax cheats, expose their offshore fortunes, and bring it home. We'll do this so that we can lower taxes on people like you, because you've been working too hard for too long to let others make off without paying their fair share. We need to lower taxes on the working people in this country with a bring-it-home tax cut on work, investment, energy, and home building. We will lower income tax for the average working-class Canadian and senior by 15%. We'll get rid of the GST or sales tax on new homes so you can actually afford a place to live. We'll cut taxes on energy by getting rid of the entire carbon tax. And we'll allow you to reinvest your capital gains without any tax as long as your reinvestment happens here in Canada. In other words, bring it home. We need to make this a country where hard work pays off, with a powerful paycheck, a beautiful home on a safe street under our proud flag. Canada first. Let's bring it home.
That was a Conservative Party of Canada video. It was, yes, to some degree propaganda, but I played it because I think it's largely, I would say almost entirely true. And it does document the fact that Mark Carney is up to no good. He is running away he was running away with his profits, putting them in Bermuda, which has no income tax. And yet he expects you to pay your tax. And I think this is a message we can't forget. And no, I was not paid to run that ad. I thought it was a good piece of information, and that's why I put it on the broadcast this morning. So thank you for watching. Now, why is there a disconnect between the polls and the rally sizes? Well, as long as Pierre Poilievre is attracting tens of thousands to his rallies from Ontario, well, actually from BC to Nova Scotia. And last night, Edmonton, of course, if you want to find one place in Alberta where Mark Carney would have had a hope of winning a seat, it would probably be Edmonton. That's the home, of course, of Randy Boissonneau, the two Randys. Edmonton Centre is his seat. Edmonton has a tendency even to elect NDP MPs. But over 15,000 people came to Pierre Poilievre's rally last night. And it was so good, had so many people there, the CBC said it was difficult to report because it was so packed. Let's listen to this report here.
We are just south of Edmonton at Pierre Poilievre's rally. His organizers say this is the biggest one yet, more than 12,000 people, and an important one for Poilievre because tonight he got the endorsement of former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Have a listen.
From a person who has been right on all the big issues for a decade, and a person who has the energy and, yes, the youth to take us forward into a better, stronger, and more united future.
There have been quite a few technical issues this evening for us because of the fact that there are just so many people packed into that building. It's made it very hard to get information in and out. But Harper did have a few key things to say. He said that he was in a unique position to talk about the leader because he is the only person where both the people running worked for him. Of course, referencing Mark Carney as the former Bank of Canada governor while Stephen Harper was the prime minister. He said that his choice for prime minister, in his words, without a shadow of a doubt, is Pierre Poilievre. He says he has known him for over a quarter of a century, that he worked hard, he fought, and he learned, and that he has the political experience, and that is the most important characteristic. So obviously a very important endorsement tonight for Pierre Poilievre, just south of Edmonton here.
Now, I don't know why it was difficult to get information in and out, simply because it was crowded. Maybe they're used to going to Mark Carney rallies. Because if you go to a Mark Carney rally, they're intentionally held in smaller locations, smaller venues, so the crowd looks bigger. I would say Mark Carney is attracting less than half, perhaps 30% of what Pierre Poilievre is attracting at his rallies. So when you attract 15,000 people, and that's apparently record-setting, I don't know if it's for Edmonton, it's certainly not the biggest rally in Canadian history. But Poilievre is well on his way to achieving that goal, if in fact that's one of his goals. He's close to achieving that objective of having the largest political rally in Canadian history. And I think as we get closer to the election, here we are, less than 3 weeks away. Now, I've been asked, before I get to the last clip here, I have been asked by several people over the last couple of days, do I think Pierre Poilievre can win this? Yes, he can win this. Even with some People's Party of Canada seats, because there's going to be a groundswell of support for Poilievre, because people are going to say, my God, Mark Carney is in the pocket of China. Mark Carney is the globalist that these people like Krayden and other podcasters and broadcasters on YouTube have been calling him. It's going to come home, as Pierre Poilievre likes to say. And this is going to happen within the next 2.5 weeks. And Poilievre is going to absolutely decimate Mark Carney in the English language debate. And if Carney's there for one of the French language debates, he'll destroy him in that one too. Let's watch a bit of that rally.
Thanks to Chief Moran, the next Member of Parliament for Edmonton Northwest. Wow, what a fantastic crowd. Thank you, Edmonton. Thank you for being here. Thank you for making yourself a positive part of the most important decision that this country is going to make in decades. Canada right now needs change more desperately than it perhaps ever has. And it needs someone to...
Note how Stephen Harper comes out with change. That message has gotten through to the Poilievre campaign. I can tell you that with some authority. The campaign is going to be talking about change, 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 not Trump, Trump, Trump. And please, right now, share this broadcast with your friends and family. YouTube is pushing my numbers down again. I documented this yesterday, and I am going to do something about it. Keep listening.
Lead that change, my friends. As someone who had the honor of serving as your Prime Minister, I know that being Prime Minister is a trust. It is a trust to take this incredible country that our ancestors bequeathed us and to leave it stronger, more united, more compassionate, and more confident than we found it. That's what we did, my friends, but that is not the story of the past decade, and that has got to change for Canada. And do bring it home, friends, because that goal does not depend on Donald Trump. It depends on us. But we will only get there with leadership from a person who has an actual policy plan, from a person who has been right on all the big issues for a decade, and a person who has the energy and, yes, the youth to take us forward into a better, stronger, and more united future. That person has been my colleague, he is my friend, he is our leader, and he is the next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre, and Anna.
Prime Minister, it is an incredible honor to have you here on this stage. It was a little surreal, I have to confess. I remember when I met then economist Stephen Harper a quarter of a century ago, before he was even back in Parliament and running for leader. And then I remember serving with him for all those years as he took us through the tumultuous times of the war in Afghanistan, the great global recession. Always and everywhere, he was solid, competent, honest, decent, down to earth, a man who could, in the words of Kipling, walk with kings but never lose his common touch.
Yeah, it's about the same time I met Stephen Harper, and I worked on one of his leadership campaigns when he took over the Canadian Alliance Party, and I was his military advisor for that. I criticized Harper often over the years because I didn't think sometimes he was being conservative enough, and I was never afraid to say that. He was angry at me many times because of columns that appeared in the Calgary Sun, the Calgary Herald. That's okay. I think overall he was a great prime minister, much better than Justin Trudeau could ever have aspired to be. And he left the country in very good shape. And he left the military in a hell of a lot better shape than Justin Trudeau did. So that was a touching moment last night. That was a great moment, a triumphant moment. I think it's going to get better for Pierre Poilievre. And I think the polls are going to start reflecting how much better it's getting. I've been doing this for over 30 years. I think I know a little bit about election campaigns. And I think I can tell you with some confidence, it's going to get better for Pierre Poilievre. And it's going to get a lot worse for Mark Carney. The honeymoon for Mark Carney is just about over. Now I gotta run today. I might be back later actually with another broadcast, but I'll be definitely back tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I've got some guests on this week. I'm just trying to arrange the schedule for that. Thanks for watching. God bless and Godspeed. I'm David Krayden.